The cold night. The night was cold. Not just cold like snow, but cold like pain, deep and quiet and endless. Lyra sat near the edge of the busy alien market. Her thin arms hugged her knees tightly, trying to keep the heat in. She had no coat, no shoes, just a torn dress and the memories of a home that didn't exist anymore. Around her, people walked fast. They didn't see her, or maybe they did, and just didn't care. Lyra had been living like this for weeks. She slept on the stone ground, ate old food from trash bins, and when the acid rains came, she hid under broken machines or inside ruined ships. But tonight felt worse. Her stomach growled so loud it hurt. Her hands were blue. Her lips cracked. Her eyes couldn't cry anymore. She was tired. So tired. A group of alien men laughed near the market gates. They looked at her. One of them made a hand sign, something Lyra knew too well. It was the sign for buying. Not food, not water, not clothes, but her. Lyra's heart sank. She looked down at herself. She didn't want to do this. She hated the idea. But what choice did she have? She whispered to herself, just one night of shelter, then I can run again. She stood up slowly. Her legs shook. She took one step toward the men. But then, a voice stopped her. Don't. It was calm, strong, and human. Lyra turned. Behind her stood a man, dressed in a dark cloak, face covered with dust. His eyes were kind, but sharp, watching everything. Don't go to them, he said again. They'll break you. Lyra stared at him, confused. No one ever spoke to her like that. Not with kindness. Not with warning. Who are you? She asked, her voice dry like sand. My name is Alex, the man said. I'm just a soldier, but I'm not here to hurt you. She laughed bitterly. No one helps for free. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small packet of food. He placed it on the ground in front of her. Then he took 2 steps back. Eat, he said. No catch. Lyra looked at the food like it was gold. She snatched it, opened it fast, and began to eat. She didn't care how she looked. Hunger didn't care about pride. Alex waited. He didn't stare. He didn't talk. He just let her eat in peace. When she finished, she looked up slowly. Why? She asked. Why help me? Alex looked up at the stars for a moment, then spoke. Because, years ago, I was just like you. Hungry. Alone. Ready to give up. Someone helped me. Saved me. Now it's my turn. Lyra wanted to believe him, but trust was hard. You don't want anything, she asked. He shook his head. I want you to live, he said simply. That's all. She felt something strange in her chest. Not fear, not hunger. Hope. But hope was dangerous. You should go, she said. If they see you with me, they'll come for you too. Alex smiled a little. Let them come. I don't scare easy. He held out his hand. I have a place. It's not much, but it's safe and warm. Lyra looked at his hand, then at the market gates. The men were still watching. She made a choice. She took his hand, and in that moment, everything changed. A warm meal, a strange place. Lyra followed him through the broken streets, her bare feet pressing into the cold metal of the old city. The night was still alive behind them. Loud voices, flashing lights, and hungry stares. But here, away from the center, it felt different. Quieter. The wind blew gently, carrying the smell of rust and smoke. Lyra didn't speak. She kept looking around, ready to run if he tried anything. That was how she had survived this long. Trust no one. Never stay in one place too long. Always watch the eyes. But this man, Alex, he didn't look back at her once. He walked slow, careful, like he didn't want to scare her. They passed through a cracked wall and entered an alley full of scrap and wires. At the end was a metal door. Alex tapped something on the side. A light flashed red, then green. Click. He pushed the door open. "After you," he said. Lyra hesitated. What if this was a trap? What if he was just like the others, but better at pretending? Still, something told her to walk forward. She stepped inside. The room was small and dark, but it didn't feel cold. A soft yellow light hung from the ceiling. On one side was a worn-out couch. On the other, a table with cans of food, tools, and a radio that hummed softly. There was a strange warmth in the air, like the place remembered what kindness felt like. "This is your home?" she asked. "For now," Alex said, locking the door behind them. "It's not much, but it keeps me alive." He walked to a shelf and pulled out a blanket. "Sit," he said gently. She sat on the edge of the couch, still not sure if she should trust the moment. He placed the blanket around her shoulders. It smelled like old cloth, but it was warm, warmer than anything she had felt in days. "Soup?" he asked. She nodded. He poured some into a small bowl and handed it to her. It was thick and brown, with bits of vegetables and dried meat. Not pretty, but real. And hot. Lyra took a spoonful, then another. Then she stopped trying to be polite and ate like a starving animal. Because she was one. Alex didn't laugh. He didn't stare. He just sat nearby, sipping water, letting her be. When she finished, she looked up slowly. "You're really not going to ask for anything," she said. "No," he replied. "Not even my name. I figure you'll tell me when you're ready." She looked at the empty bowl, then at the floor. "It's Lyra," she whispered. Alex smiled. "Nice to meet you, Lyra." She didn't remember the last time someone said her name like that. Not as a number, not as a price, just a name. Her eyes burned. She blinked fast to stop the tears. "You said someone saved you before," she said. "What happened?" Alex leaned back. His eyes turned distant. "I was a soldier. Human war. Not this planet. Long time ago. My ship crashed. I was alone for weeks. Wounded. Bleeding. Hiding from enemies." He touched a scar on his neck. "One day, a local farmer found me. He could have sold me or killed me. But he didn't. He hid me. Fed me. Risked everything." "Why?" Lyra asked softly. Alex shrugged. "I asked him that too." He said, "Because you're still breathing. That's reason enough." Lyra held the blanket tighter. "People like that don't exist anymore," she said. "They do," Alex replied. "Just harder to find." There was a silence. Not awkward, just real. Lyra looked at him again. He was older than she first thought. Maybe late 30s. His beard was rough, his eyes tired. But he had the calm of someone who had seen death, and still chose to live with kindness. "You don't know me," she said. "I've done bad things." "So have I," he said. "We all have." "But I almost—" She stopped. Her voice shook. "I was ready to sell myself tonight, just to stay warm." Alex didn't flinch. "And yet, you didn't." That made her pause. "You stopped me," she said. "No," he said gently. "You stopped yourself. I was just there." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever seen her like this. Not as a product. Not as prey. As a person. Suddenly, the radio on the table crackled. A deep voice came through. "Unit 7, do you copy? Scanners show human movement in Sector 14. Possible rebel contact." Alex stood quickly and turned the volume down. Lyra jumped up. "You're being watched?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. He looked at her calmly. "I'm not just a soldier. I'm something else now." She stepped back. "Are you a rebel?" Alex didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said enough. "I don't want trouble," she whispered. "You won't have trouble," he said. "Not from me." She stared at him, heart racing. "You could get killed for helping someone like me," she said. He nodded. I know. Then why? She asked again. Alex walked to the small window. He looked out at the night sky, stars far above, free and untouched. Because maybe, he said slowly, if we stop helping each other, we stop being human. Lyra didn't speak. Her chest felt heavy and warm. For the first time in so long, she felt safe. She lay down on the couch, pulling the blanket around her. Her body relaxed, but her mind was awake, full of thoughts. Maybe this man was crazy. Maybe he'd get them both killed. But maybe, just maybe, he was real. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. Hunted. Lyra woke with a jolt. Her heart pounded fast, like it had been running in her sleep. She sat up, eyes darting across the small room. It was still dark, but the warmth of the blanket around her reminded her she wasn't outside. She wasn't in danger. Not yet. Alex was already awake. He sat near the door, cleaning a small weapon. His face was calm, focused. He didn't look surprised to see her awake. Bad dreams? He asked softly. Lyra nodded. They always come. He handed her a cup of warm liquid. Drink. It helps. She sipped it. It tasted strange, like bitter herbs and honey, but it soothed her chest. Thanks, she said, her voice low. They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of them knew how to say yet. After a long moment, Lyra spoke. I need to tell you something. Alex looked at her. I'm not just any alien girl. He said nothing, just waited. I'm being hunted, she said, by the slavers, and others too, because I have something they want. She looked down at her hands, ashamed, like they held a curse. I can sense energy, she whispered. Life energy. Power sources. Even the kind that's hidden or cloaked. Alex blinked. Slowly. That's rare, he said. Lyra nodded. My people used to protect the energy wells of our planet. We could feel them, guard them. But when the wars came, they found out what we could do. She paused. They didn't want us as guardians anymore. They'd wanted us as tools. Alex leaned forward, eyes serious now. So they tried to take you. They did, she said. Her voice cracked. I was only a child. They put me in a cage. They brought me to ships, cities, testing rooms. They made me find things for them. Hidden power, ancient relics, stolen cores. Her fingers shook. But one night, there was an explosion in the lab. I ran. I didn't stop. I've been running ever since. Alex was quiet for a long time. You've been through hell, he said. She gave a sad smile. You could say that. And now they want you back, he said. To use you again. Lyra looked up, her eyes sharper now. No, she said. Now they want me dead. I know too much. Just then, the radio on the table crackled again. Unit 9 to base. Heat signature detected in lower zone. Possible fugitive. Coordinates locked. Lyra's blood went cold. Alex jumped up, switched off the radio, and grabbed his gear. They're close, he said. Too close. He moved fast, packing a small bag with supplies. Lyra stood, fear rising. They found me. It's my fault. No, Alex said firmly. They found us. And we moved together. She stared at him. You're still helping me, even now. He met her eyes. Lyra, this isn't about helping anymore. You're not some helpless girl. You're powerful. You're important. And you deserve to live. A loud boom shook the walls. A blast. Close by. Alex threw her the blanket. Cover your face. We're going underground. They ran to the back of the room, where a floor panel lifted to reveal a hidden tunnel. Go, he shouted. She crawled in first. The tunnel was narrow, filled with dust and old cables, but it was better than the fire above. As they moved deeper, Lyra felt it. A pulse. Stop, she whispered. Alex froze. What is it? They have drones, she said. Cloaked ones. I can feel their energy buzzing ahead. Alex frowned. You can feel cloaked drones. I told you, she said. It's my curse, or maybe my gift. He looked amazed. Then you'll guide us. She nodded and led the way, her hands brushing the tunnel walls like she was feeling air itself. They turned left, then right, avoiding 2 ambush zones. Minutes later, they climbed out into an old supply warehouse, full of rusted crates and broken machines. Alex sealed the door behind them and set up a motion scanner. Lyra dropped to the floor, breathing hard. You okay? He asked. I will be, she said, if we make it out. He sat beside her, watching the scanner lights. You saved me back there, he said. If you hadn't warned me about those drones. She shrugged. You saved me first. Another silence. Then Lyra looked at him. What now? Alex pulled out a map and unfolded it. There's a place, he said, deep in the mountains, rebel safe zone. They help people like you, people the system tried to erase. You trust them. With my life. Lyra nodded slowly. I want to go, she said. You sure? She looked at the rising sun through the cracks in the roof. I'm tired of running without reason, she said. If I run again, I want it to be toward something. Alex smiled. Then we go together. As they stood up, preparing for the journey ahead, neither of them noticed the small red light blinking on one of the crates behind them. Someone had already seen them. And they weren't far. The hidden power. The wind in the mountains was sharp and dry. It bit into the skin like tiny knives, but Lyra didn't complain. Not once. She had walked for hours beside Alex, her feet aching, her body sore, but her heart steady. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from something. She was walking toward something. The rebel safe zone, Alex had told her, was hidden in the cliffs, behind layers of old tech and mountains carved by war. No one could reach it without special access. Even fewer could leave. You sure we're not walking into a trap? She asked, half joking. Alex smiled. If it's a trap, it's a cozy one, with hot soup and beds. She gave him a look. You and your soup. You never forget the first hot meal after starving, he said softly. Lyra looked away, not because she disagreed, but because she understood. By nightfall, they reached the edge of a ridge where nothing but rocks and cold winds moved. Alex pressed his hand to a jagged wall. A soft click echoed, and a piece of the mountain shifted like a puzzle piece. A hidden door opened. Lyra stepped back, wide-eyed. Alex led her in. The tunnel inside was dim, but dry and warmer. Lights buzzed gently on the ceiling. The path curved downward, deeper into the earth. Finally, they arrived in a wide underground chamber glowing with yellow lights and filled with people, humans and aliens alike. Some wore weapons, some lab coats. Most looked tired, but none looked cruel. A woman with silver hair and cybernetic eyes walked up to Alex. You're late, she said. Alex nodded. We ran into drones. The woman looked at Lyra. And this is Lyra, he said. She's the one. The woman's eyes scanned Lyra from head to toe. You brought her here. Lyra stepped back, unsure. Alex placed a hand on her shoulder. She's not a threat. The woman didn't smile, but she nodded. Fine. If you trust her, I will too. For now. Lyra wanted to speak, but didn't know what to say. The woman waved them in. Follow me. Let's test what she can really do. The test. They entered a room lined with strange machines and blinking lights. At the center was a round platform with glowing patterns. Stand here, the silver-haired woman said to Lyra. What is this? Lyra asked. A simple scan. We want to see your power in action. Lyra looked at Alex. He nodded. It's safe. She stepped onto the platform. Suddenly, Lights flared around her. Holograms flickered to life, showing images of energy pulses, hidden signals, and ancient tech buried beneath cities. The machines reacted to her like they were alive, buzzing, glowing, spinning faster. One screen beeped and turned red. The woman's eyes widened. She's scanning beyond the surface level, even through heavy shielding. Lyra backed off, breathing hard. What does that mean? It means, the woman said slowly, you're not just gifted, you're one of a kind. Alex stepped forward. We can use this, right? To find the lost core. The woman nodded. If she's willing. Lyra looked between them. What's the lost core? Alex turned to her. It's a hidden power source, old tech from before the wars. If we find it, it could power thousands of rebel colonies, free entire cities from control. But it's buried, the woman added. Deep, cloaked. No one's been able to find it. Lyra felt the weight of their words. And you want me to find it? No, Alex said. We want to ask if you're willing. That mattered to her. She nodded slowly. I'll try. Training begins. In the days that followed, Lyra trained with rebel tech specialists. They taught her how to focus her senses, how to read energy like language, how to track signals through the noise of machines. She learned fast. Her powers were stronger than anyone had imagined. She could not only find energy, but feel its age, its purpose, even its damage. Alex watched her in awe. You're not a tool, he said one evening, as they sat under a heat lamp. You're a miracle. No, Lyra said. I'm just someone who was broken, but not completely. They both smiled at that, but not everything was calm. Outside, across the stars, the slavers were searching. One bounty hunter in particular, a cruel creature named Varn, had received a tip. The girl had been seen. Alive. Whispers of the past. One night, as Lyra walked alone in the tunnels, she heard a strange hum. A soft, warm vibration pulling her deeper into the cave. She followed it. At the end of the tunnel, behind a cracked wall, was a forgotten chamber. Inside was a sphere, glowing faintly, pulsing like a heart. Her hand moved toward it. She could feel it speaking, not in words, but in feeling. Loneliness, power, age, memory. She touched it. Suddenly, images flashed in her mind. A city in flames, her people screaming. A lab, a child, herself, crying in a metal room. She fell back, gasping. Alex found her there minutes later. What happened? She looked up at him, shaken. That thing. It remembers me. Alex helped her up. You're more connected to this world than you know, he said. Lyra nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time I stop hiding from it. The mission ahead. Later that night, the rebel leaders gathered. Lyra stood beside Alex, calm now, ready. I know where the core is, she said. They looked at her in shock. It's buried beneath the dead fields, she explained. But it's guarded, not by machines, by pain, by what was done there. The silver-haired woman nodded. We'll prepare a team. But Alex shook his head. No, not a full team. We move quiet, just a few of us. Lyra looked at him. We'll go together, he said. She didn't hesitate. Yes. But far away, in the cold of space, a ship's radar beeped. Varn, the bounty hunter, grinned as he looked at the screen. Found you, little ghost. Rise of the girl no one wanted. The wind across the dead fields didn't whisper, it screamed. The air was dry, sharp, and lifeless. Not a tree. Not a sound. Only cracked ground stretching into the horizon, littered with rusted machines and skeletons of warships long forgotten. They called it dead for a reason. No one came here. Except now. A single transport vehicle moved slowly through the dust. Inside it, Lyra sat beside Alex, her eyes closed, her mind open, her hands pressed against the side of the ship, feeling every vibration, every signal under the surface. Alex kept glancing at her. She looked different now, stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. Her face was calm, focused, not like the scared girl who had once begged for warmth in the dark. He smiled to himself. She was changing. She was becoming something more. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded without opening her eyes. "It's close. The core is deep, under layers of lost tech. But there's something else." "What?" "A heartbeat," she whispered. "Something. Alive." Alex's face grew serious. "Alive how?" But Lyra didn't answer. Because just then, the ship slammed to a stop. Dust blew everywhere. The driver, a rebel named Creel, shouted from the front, "We've got a problem." Alex and Lyra jumped out of the ship. In the distance, they saw it. A group of alien children, skinny, scared, chained together, were being dragged by armed raiders across the field. The slavers hadn't seen the ship yet, but they were close. Lyra's heart pounded. Her hands curled into fists. "No," she said, "not again." Alex looked at her. "It's not our mission. We can't risk blowing our cover." Lyra turned to him, fire in her voice. "You told me we help because we're still breathing." He looked at her, then at the kids. "You're right," he said. "We help." The rescue. Alex, Lyra, and Creel moved fast. They took a hidden route through the ruins, climbing over broken tanks and under rusted beams. Lyra used her power to guide them around energy mines. One wrong step could kill them all. "I can feel the mines humming," she whispered, like angry bees. They reached a ridge above the slavers. There were 6 of them, ugly, armored, armed with plasma rifles, laughing, kicking the children forward. Alex loaded his rifle. "We go silent. Quick. Hit hard. Creel, cover the left. Lyra, I want you to stay." "No," Lyra said. "I'm going down there." "Lyra, it's dangerous. They won't shoot a girl who looks weak. But I'm not weak anymore." Before he could stop her, she slid down the hill. Alex cursed. She's going to get herself killed. But he didn't move. He trusted her, the ghost girl who saves. Lyra walked slowly toward the slavers, hands raised, head down. She looked like a lost scavenger. The slavers turned, guns raised. One of them growled, "What do you want, little rat?" "I want shelter," she said softly. They laughed. But the laughter stopped when the chains around the children suddenly snapped open on their own. Then the lights on the slavers' weapons went dark. What the? Their rifles buzzed, sparked, then shut off completely. Lyra stood tall now, eyes glowing faintly blue. "I can feel the power inside your tech," she said, "and now I control it." Panic spread. From the ridge, Alex gave the signal. He and Creel opened fire, non-lethal stun rounds. Within seconds, it was over. The slavers fell. The children ran into Lyra's arms. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around them. "You're safe now," she whispered. "No one's going to hurt you again." One small boy looked up at her, eyes wide. "Who are you?" She smiled. "No one important," she said. "Just someone who remembers what it's like to be forgotten." The name that spread. By nightfall, they had reached the core site. The rescued children were sent to the safe zone with Creel, while Alex and Lyra went ahead. But something had changed. Lyra's name was being whispered now. Among rebels, among slaves, among broken cities. They called her the ghost girl who saves. Because she came from nowhere. She walked with power. She freed the lost. And she didn't ask for anything in return. Alex looked at her as they sat near a campfire. "You know what this means, right?" he said. She looked confused. "What?" "You're becoming hope. Real hope." Lyra stared into the fire. "That scares me." "Why?" "Because hope is fragile. One wrong move, and it dies." He reached over and took her hand gently. Then we protected together. She didn't let go. The core revealed. The next day, they found it, buried beneath layers of stone and time. Lyra knelt, eyes closed, palms pressed to the dirt. "It's here," she whispered. "Old, powerful, and angry." Alex raised a brow. "Angry." She nodded. "It was taken from its home, buried, forgotten, like me." They began digging with old tools, working for hours. Dust filled their lungs. Sweat soaked their clothes. But finally, metal shone in the dark. A large orb, pulsing faintly blue. Ancient tech. Alive. Lyra placed her hand on it. And suddenly, light exploded. Not fire. Not heat. Just memory. Images filled her mind. The past. The war. Her people. Her parents. She gasped. Alex caught her as she collapsed. "Lyra." She blinked, weak but smiling. "I saw them," she whispered. "My family. They were here. They helped build this." Alex looked at the glowing orb. "This changes everything," he said. But behind them, a sound, a soft metal click. They turned and saw a figure stepping out from the shadows. A tall alien with red armor, dark eyes, and a scar across his face. Varn, the bounty hunter. He grinned. "Found you, little ghost," into the fire. The moment Varn stepped from the shadows, time seemed to freeze. The bounty hunter's voice echoed in the hollow cavern like poison sliding across cold stone. Well, the ghost girl is real after all." Lyra instinctively stepped in front of the glowing energy core. Her body was trembling, but her eyes held fire. "Don't move," Alex whispered behind her. "I wasn't planning to," she said through clenched teeth. Varn raised a metal device to his mouth. "Target acquired. Human soldier confirmed. Energy-sensitive subject confirmed. Preparing transport." Alex raised his weapon. "You won't take her." Varn laughed. "You think you matter, soldier? You're a story they'll forget. She's worth more than 10 planets." Lyra clenched her fists. "I'm not a price tag." "Oh no," Varn said, grinning. "You're an investment." Before Alex could shoot, Varn threw a silver orb to the ground. Boom. A burst of blinding light. The air cracked. Lyra was thrown backward, hitting the cavern wall hard. Her ears rang. Her vision spun. She heard Alex shout her name. Once, then nothing. The prisoner. When Lyra woke, everything was dark. Her hands were tied with glowing cuffs. Her body ached. Her head throbbed. She was inside a small, moving ship, cold, metal, empty, except for one figure chained across from her. Alex. Beaten, bleeding, barely conscious. "Alex," she cried, pulling against the cuffs. He opened his eyes slowly. "You're okay." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "You shouldn't have tried to protect me." He gave a weak smile. "I wasn't protecting you. I was fighting beside you." She leaned forward. "We have to get out. We have to." "I disabled their tracker," he said softly. "We've got maybe 2 hours before they realize." "Then we use it," she whispered. Lyra closed her eyes. She focused. The cuffs were made of plasma steel, charged from the ship's core. But energy spoke to her. It always had. She reached out with her mind. The cuffs buzzed. Then, snap. They opened. She gasped, then ran to Alex and broke his too. "How did you?" "No time," she said. "Can you stand?" He nodded, pushing himself up with a groan. They moved fast, silent. Down the narrow hall of the ship, guards would be on patrol. They needed a plan. "I'll draw them," Alex whispered. "You head for the control room." "No," Lyra said. "We do this together." But Alex didn't listen. He ran out, yelling, grabbing attention. "Hey, over here." Guards turned, chasing him. Lyra turned the other way, toward the bridge. The turning point. The control room was quiet. Too quiet. Lyra stepped inside. A single pilot turned in shock. She threw a metal wrench at the lights. Crash. Darkness. The pilot fumbled for his weapon. But Lyra was faster. She didn't fight with fists. She fought with power. She touched the panel, felt the heartbeat of the ship, the energy inside, the wires, the fuel, the fire. And she spoke to it. The lights flickered. The engines coughed. Then shut down. The ship dropped, fast and shaking. Lyra grabbed the pilot and slammed him against the door. Land this safely. Now. I can't, he stammered. Then I will. The crash. Alex was fighting two guards when the ship began to fall. He heard alarms. Saw lights flash red. The ground tilted. Lyra, he whispered. She was doing something big. Again. He kicked one guard aside, grabbed the wall, and held on. Seconds later, boom. The ship hit the ground, skidding through sand and dust before slamming into a canyon wall. Metal twisted. Fires sparked. Smoke rose. Inside, Lyra crawled from the wreckage, coughing. Her legs were scraped, her arms bruised, but she was alive. And she had saved them both. She limped toward the back, calling, "Alex? Alex." He emerged, blood on his forehead but walking. "You did it," he said, eyes wide. "I almost didn't," she said, tears in her voice. "But you did." The fire inside. They hid in a cave for the night, the firelight dancing on the stone walls. Lyra sat close to Alex, wrapping a cloth around his arm. "I was ready to give up when they took us," she said. "But you didn't." She nodded, "Because I remembered what you said, about kindness, about breathing. And I thought, maybe I'm still worth saving." Alex looked at her. "You're not just worth saving, Lyra. You're worth believing in." She looked down. "I'm scared of what I'm becoming." "Don't be," he said. "You're becoming exactly who you were meant to be. Back to the core." At sunrise, they returned to the crash site and retrieved what was left of the energy core. It had survived. But now, they had no transport, no backup, and enemies were surely on the way. Lyra stood tall. "We walk." Alex smiled weakly. "That's what you said before." She looked ahead, across the canyon, past the ruins and the fire. This time, she wasn't walking away from pain. She was walking into it, to face it, to end it, to change everything. The human who changed everything. The path to the rebel base was long, brutal, and silent. Lyra and Alex walked across dust fields and shattered stone, their legs shaking with every step. The air was dry. The sun beat down, but neither of them complained. They carried the damaged energy core between them, one side each. It wasn't just metal and wires. It was hope. Hope was heavy, but they carried it anyway. As they reached the edge of the rebel cliffs, sensors blinked and a door opened in the rocks. A medic team rushed out, shocked to see the two survivors. Behind them, the silver-haired rebel leader stood wide-eyed. "You're alive," she said. Alex nodded. "And we brought it." Lyra stepped forward. "The core is real, but it's more than that." The woman looked confused. "What do you mean?" "It's connected to our past. My past. It remembers us. It's waiting to be used for good, not control." The woman's eyes softened. "You're different now, Lyra." Lyra smiled slightly. "I am." She looked at Alex. "Because he was different first. The core awakens. Engineers worked through the night." Lyra stayed beside the core, her hands lightly resting on its surface. She guided them gently, telling them when the pulse was strong, when it was afraid, when it was calm. The core reacted to her like a child finally recognizing its parent. Finally, it lit up, bright and blue, steady, ready. The base roared with cheers. For the first time in years, they had power. Clean power. Endless power. They could light cities again. Heal machines. Feed colonies. Lyra didn't cheer. She just sat quietly. Alex came over and knelt beside her. "You did it." She looked up. "No, we did." The broadcast. The rebels didn't want to hide anymore. They sent out a signal across the galaxy. A message that reached both slaves and slavers, soldiers and survivors, cities and wastelands. On every screen, a calm voice spoke. It wasn't a general, not a politician, not a warlord. It was Lyra. She stood before a small camera, simple clothes, glowing eyes, steady hands. "My name is Lyra," she said. "I was once a slave, a number, a thing to be used. I was thrown away. I begged in the streets. I nearly gave away my body just to sleep under a roof. But one day, a human man stopped me. He didn't ask me for anything. He just gave me something no one else had. Kindness." She paused. That one act changed everything. "Now I stand here, not as a ghost, not as a tool, but as proof. Proof that we are more than what they say we are. Proof that one voice, one hand, one heart can start a fire big enough to light the stars." Behind her, the core pulsed softly. "I'm not here to lead a war. I'm here to remind you, you matter. And if someone like me, someone unwanted, hunted, forgotten, can rise, then so can you." The broadcast ended, and the galaxy changed. The aftermath. They started calling her Lyra of the Light. People painted her face on walls. Children repeated her words. Small groups of rebels in distant moons finally had something to believe in. But she didn't chase fame. She stayed where it all began, in the rebel base, helping build, train, guide. She spent hours teaching others with her gifts. Some had small sparks like hers. Others just had the will to fight back in their own way. She never stopped telling her story. She never let them forget how it started. With hunger, with fear, with pain, and with a single voice in the dark that said, "Don't." Alex's choice. One night, weeks later, Alex stood at the edge of the cliffs, staring out at the stars. Lyra found him there. "Thinking of leaving?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Thinking of how it all changed so fast?" She nodded. "I still wake up wondering if it was all a dream." He turned to her. "You were the dream. You just hadn't woken up yet." She smiled, small and true. "Are you proud of me?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just wrapped her in a quiet, steady hug. "I never doubted you," he whispered. "Not once." A final message. Before dawn, Lyra stood outside the base. A small girl, one of the rescued slave children, ran up to her with a hand-drawn picture. It showed Lyra standing in front of a giant energy core, glowing like the sun, with tiny people standing behind her, safe and smiling. The little girl smiled. "I drew you with power." Lyra knelt. "I didn't save you with power." "Then how?" the girl asked. "With something more important," Lyra said. "I listened. I cared. And someone cared for me too." She looked up at the sky, where 1,000 broken voices were waiting for someone to tell them they still mattered. And she whispered to the stars, "I was ready to sell myself for shelter, but one human gave me back my soul. And now, I will spend the rest of my life giving that gift to others."